Hands behind your back, now. Jamal barely has time to react before rough hands yank him backward, his chest slamming against cold metal. A sharp gasp escapes his lips as cuffs snap tight around his wrists. I didn't. The officer shoves him harder against the car, silencing him. His lawyer ID tumbles from his pocket, landing inches from his polished shoes. He exhales sharply, his heart pounding, not from fear, but from controlled fury. You're making a mistake, Jamal says, voice steady, despite the heat rising in his chest. I'm an attorney. Yeah, and I'm the damn mayor. An officer sneers, yanking Jamal upright. Sergeant Mitchell steps forward, smirking. Well, looks like we caught ourselves a professional. The other officers chuckle. Jamal swallows hard. Jamal lifts his chin, keeping his voice measured. Check my ID. It's in front of you. An officer bends down, picking up the wallet lazily. He flips through it, scoffing. Nice prop, he mutters. Where'd you steal it? Jamal clenches his jaw. Read the name. Jamal Carter, licensed attorney. Sergeant Mitchell plucks the ID from the officer's hand, tilting it under the streetlights. He barely glances at it before shoving it back. Cute story, Mitchell says. Doesn't change the fact that you fit the description. Jamal exhales slowly, controlling his anger. He knew this game. Knew how it ended if he lost his temper. Murmurs ripple through the growing crowd. A few bystanders lift their phones, recording the scene from a safe distance. What did he do? Someone asks. Doesn't matter. A man in a business suit replies, arms crossed. They wouldn't cuff him for nothing. Jamal turns his head, locking eyes with the man. Recognition flashes. He'd walked past this same stranger minutes ago, adjusting his watch. That was all. Good job, officers, the man says. I saw him lurking. Lurking, Jamal inhales sharply, pushing the word down like bile. The officers exchange smug glances, emboldened. See? Even the good citizens know what's up, one of them mutters. Let's move him. Jamal stiffens as they tighten their grip, steering him toward the squad car. Jamal barely stumbles before rough hands shove him forward. You can't just... A hard push cuts him off. His briefcase slips from his grip, bursting open. Papers scatter like fallen leaves, landing in dirty puddles on the pavement. Contracts, case files, evidence of the life he built, discarded like trash. Sergeant Mitchell steps over the mess without looking down. Welcome to reality, counselor, he says. Jamal exhales through his nose, swallowing the words he wants to say. They slam the door shut, locking him inside. The barrier between them feels like more than just glass and metal. Through the window, Jamal stares at the officers laughing, his breath slow, controlled. They think they've won. For now, the sirens wail, drowning out his thoughts. Jamal stares at the city blurring past, his reflection staring back at him in the window. Memories claw their way to the surface. 15 years old, accused of stealing from a store he'd never set foot in. 22, a professor questioning if he really wrote his own paper. 30, a judge calling him articulate like it was a compliment. Now this. His fists clench in his lap. He should be in his office, preparing for tomorrow's hearing. Instead, he's in the back of a police car, no different from the men he's defended. No different at all. The squad car turns a corner. Behind them, his briefcase lies open on the pavement, its contents soaking under flickering streetlights. He closes his eyes. This wasn't over, not even close. The police car jolts over a pothole, but Jamal barely feels it. His gaze drifts past the flashing streetlights, past the city he once thought he belonged to. His reflection in the window stares back, silent, unreadable. Then a different memory surfaces. A classroom, a library. A boy hunched over a thick book, fingers tracing the words like they held the answers to everything. The sirens fade, the engine hums beneath him, and just like that, he's 10 years old again. Jamal turns the brittle pages of a law book, the words bigger than his hands. A voice interrupts. Are you lost? He glances up. The librarian's gaze lingers, doubtful. He shakes his head. I'm reading. At school, it's the same story. Teachers pause before calling his name. You sure you belong in AP classes? He answers, with perfect scores, with debates won, with hands always raised. Whispers follow him, but he doesn't stop. Because one day, they won't just see a black boy. They'll see a lawyer. Law school is supposed to be different. It isn't. Jamal walks into his first class, eyes trailing over rows of students who don't look like him. When he speaks, professors look through him. When he challenges a case, classmates exchange glances. You're overthinking it, one smirks. Until a mock trial. Until he tears apart the opposition, argument airtight. The room shifts. Respect comes slow, reluctant. Jamal leans back, voice steady. Any more objections? Silence. He doesn't smile. He just moves forward, like always. Years later, Jamal steps into a courtroom, not as an outsider, but as a defense attorney. He fights for the accused, the overlooked, and yet, can I help you? A security guard blocks his path at his own firm. We need proof you actually work here. A client mistakes him for the assistant. A colleague jokes about him being so well-spoken. Success didn't change the rules. They just moved the goalposts. The squad car slows. Jamal blinks, the past dissolving as the present takes hold. The cuffs press into his wrists, a cruel reminder. He inhales deeply, letting the air settle in his chest. He's not a child in a library, not a student in law school. He's a man in a cage, but not for long. Jamal sits stiffly, the metal cuffs digging into his wrists. His jaw tightens, but his voice remains even. I demand to know why I'm being detained. Sergeant Mitchell leans against the wall, arms crossed, lips curling into a smirk. You fit the description. No details, no explanation, just those 3 words. An excuse disguised as authority. Jamal exhales slowly. What description? Mitchell shrugs. A black man, expensive car, seemed out of place. Jamal's stomach turns, but he keeps his posture rigid. He's been here before. Different room, different faces, same fight. A younger officer eyes Jamal's tailored suit, lips twitching. Nice suit. He exchanges a glance with another cop. Bet it ain't his. Laughter ripples through the room. Jamal's fingers flex against the cuffs. His voice remains steady. I'm a defense attorney. Mocking gasps. One officer leans in, tapping his badge. Oh, my bad. I didn't realize we arrested Harvard. The room erupts again. Another officer tilts his head, grinning. Defense attorney? Right. And I'm the president. Jamal meets their gaze, his expression unreadable. They want a reaction. They won't get one. Jamal inhales sharply, centering himself. I want my phone call. His tone is measured, controlled. Mitchell raises an eyebrow, then snorts. Phone call? Oh, you must think this is TV. More chuckles, more silence. No one moves. Jamal presses his lips together. I have the right. You have whatever rights I say you have. Mitchell cuts him off, stepping closer. Jamal's pulse drums in his ears, but he doesn't blink. They're dragging this out on purpose, testing him, waiting for him to crack. The air thickens. Jamal feels it creeping into his lungs, pressing against his ribs. This is routine for them. Another night, another black man in cuffs, a joke to pass the time. One officer sighs dramatically. Bet he's got a record. Should I check? Mitchell shrugs. Does it matter? Laughter follows, but it sounds distant, muffled. Jamal stares ahead, hands curled into fists behind his back. The rage is there, always there, but he's learned to swallow it. They expect anger. They expect him to lash out. He won't. Not on their terms. Jamal straightens, locking eyes with Mitchell. You done? His voice is calm, unshaken. The laughter dies. The shift is subtle, but he feels it. Control slipping from their hands. Mitchell's smirk falters. A pause stretches too long. Jamal doesn't move, doesn't flinch. He's been fighting this battle his whole life, and he's not losing now. Jamal sits on the hard bench, wrists aching from the cuffs that were finally removed. The air is thick with sweat, stale breath, and quiet murmurs. A clock ticks on the far wall, each second dragging. He exhales slowly. Every minute spent here is a stolen moment of dignity. A guard finally approaches, peering through the bars. You got a call. Jamal stands, stretching his stiff limbs. About time. The officer scoffs, unlocking the door. Yeah, don't get too excited. Jamal doesn't respond. He just walks forward, jaw tight, knowing this call could change everything. Jamal grips the receiver, pressing it to his ear. I need to speak with my firm. A disinterested voice sighs on the other end. Public defender assigned to your case. Listen. You'll probably just get a fine. Best to plead out. His fingers tighten around the phone. I'm a lawyer. I know my rights. A long pause, then a chuckle. Then you know how this works. Jamal's breath steadies. I need a real lawyer. The voice on the line is unmoved. Good luck with that. The call disconnects. Jamal exhales through his nose. He's on his own, for now. An officer leans against the bars, shaking his head. So, Harvard, what's the plan? Gonna sue us? Another officer snickers. Bet he doesn't even own that suit. Laughter echoes through the cell. Jamal remains still, fingers interlocked, gaze unreadable. You know, the first officer continues. You don't look like a lawyer. You look like... Jamal cuts him off, his voice measured. Like what? Silence. The officer blinks, then smirks, like someone who's not getting out anytime soon. The cell erupts again. Jamal exhales, locking away the anger. Let them laugh. He won't be here much longer. Footsteps echo down the hall. The laughter dies. The door creaks open. Sergeant Mitchell strolls in, arms folded, smirk in place. Looks like someone made a call. You're free to go. No apology, no explanation, just those empty words. Jamal stands, adjusting his sleeves. I assume my belongings are intact? Mitchell's smirk widens. Of course. We'd never mistreat a distinguished man like yourself. The sarcasm is thick, but Jamal doesn't bite. He steps forward. The officers part for him, still watching like he's a curiosity, a spectacle. Jamal doesn't rush, doesn't react, because control, that belongs to him now. At the threshold, Jamal pauses. He turns, his gaze locking onto Mitchell. The room stills. You'll be seeing me again very soon. The smirk flickers. Just for a second. Jamal lets the moment stretch before walking out. The night air greets him, cool and unshaken. His briefcase is gone, his reputation questioned, but one thing remains intact. His resolve, because this isn't over, not even close. The courtroom hums with quiet conversations as officers file in, oblivious. Sergeant Mitchell leans back in his chair, arms crossed, smirking. Just another case, another routine. But today, routine doesn't exist. Today, Jamal isn't the man they laughed at in a holding cell. A clerk clears her throat. Court is now in session. Mitchell barely looks up, until the doors swing open, until the air shifts, until the man they dismissed the night before steps forward, wearing a judge's robe. The room stiffens. Conversations halt. Mitchell sits upright, confusion flashing in his eyes. Jamal doesn't look at him, not yet. The bailiff's voice cuts through the silence. All rise for Judge Jamal Carter. The courtroom stands, but the shock sits heavy. Mitchell's smirk vanishes. His jaw tightens, hands gripping the table. One officer leans over whispering, "You gotta be kidding me." No one laughs this time. Jamal steps forward, his voice even. "You may be seated." Chairs creak as people lower themselves, eyes darting between the officers and the judge's bench. Mitchell shifts, clearing his throat. This some kind of joke? Jamal finally looks at him. Do I look like I'm laughing? Mitchell blinks. For the first time, he doesn't have a comeback. Jamal approaches the bench, each step deliberate, the same control he held in that holding cell. Now, it's amplified, solidified. He stops, adjusts his robe, and takes his seat. His fingers brush the gavel, his courtroom, his authority. He lets the moment linger before finally speaking. Before we proceed, I want to make one thing clear. Mitchell swallows. Yeah? And what's that? Jamal tilts his head, eyes unwavering. I don't hold grudges. A pause. But I do believe in justice. Mitchell shifts uncomfortably. He knows what's coming. The power has shifted. And for the first time, he's on the wrong side of it. Mitchell's hands twitch. His gaze flickers toward the exit. But there's nowhere to go. Jamal exhales, slow and steady. He picks up the case file, skims it, then looks back up. Shall we begin? The words land heavy. The gavel slams. Mitchell flinches. The courtroom holds its breath. This isn't the same man they mocked, detained, or underestimated. This is Judge Carter. And today, justice isn't just being served. It's being rewritten. Jamal folds his hands on the bench, his expression unreadable. The silence stretches, heavy and unrelenting. Mitchell sits rigid, his usual arrogance nowhere to be found. The other officers shift in their seats, casting nervous glances at one another. Jamal finally speaks. Before we begin today's proceedings, he pauses, letting the weight of the moment settle. There's another matter that must be addressed. Mitchell's throat bobs. His fingers curl into fists. For years, He dictated the rules. Now, he's just another name on a list. Jamal picks up a document. A matter of serious misconduct. And just like that, the balance of power is gone. Jamal's voice remains steady, controlled. Certain officers have engaged in behavior unbecoming of the law. He scans the courtroom. Sergeant Mitchell, Officer Harding, Officer Blake. Each name is a verdict, a weight dropped into the silent room. Mitchell stiffens. Harding's face pales. Blake swears under his breath. The murmurs start. Spectators lean in, eyes widening. Even the officers who aren't named shift in discomfort. Jamal doesn't flinch. Harassment, false imprisonment, abuse of power. His gaze lands on Mitchell. Ring any bells? The tension in the air is suffocating. Mitchell finally meets his eyes, but the confidence he once carried is gone. He isn't the one asking the questions anymore. Mitchell exhales sharply. You can't do this. Jamal leans back. You mean hold officers accountable? A flicker of something crosses Mitchell's face. Panic, anger, regret. Maybe all three. Harding mutters, This is ridiculous. Jamal doesn't blink. Is it? No one answers. Mitchell glances around, but there's no support, no lifeline. The same system that once shielded him is watching him now. Jamal lets the silence stretch, the weight of their actions pressing down on them. The smirk Mitchell wore the night before? Gone. But on Jamal's face, just the hint of one. Jamal taps his fingers once against the bench. Justice isn't real if it doesn't apply to everyone. Mitchell doesn't respond. He can't. Jamal tilts his head slightly. So let's find out, does it? The final words settle like a gavel strike. Mitchell's throat tightens. His palms sweat. For the first time, he's the one waiting on a verdict. And this time, there's no way out. Justice isn't real if it doesn't apply to everyone. If you believe in fairness, if you believe in accountability, make your voice heard. Hit the like button. Subscribe for more stories that demand to be told. Because silence allows injustice to thrive. And together, we can make sure it doesn't.